Hello, welcome to Calls with your Kinky Bestie. I'm Emma. I am a submissive and mentor for fellow kinksters. This podcast is all about insights into kinky life and dating, sharing my personal experience and stories, and help share mindset shifts too to get you into a confident space, more confident than you are now. So get ready. It all starts now.
Are you getting ghosted online? Are you confused? Are you sad? I'm so sorry. I've been there too. This is the episode where we dive into why that happens, how to prevent that from happening, understanding it a little bit more, and moving the fuck on from this energy because you don't deserve it, babe. You don't deserve it. Okay, so why this happens? What is the phenomenon? So first of all, if you don't know, if you can't relate to this first part and you're just like along for the ride because this is a podcast you follow, hi, hello, welcome. Thanks for hanging in and learning new things anyways. There's a little bit of a phenomenon, and I don't even want to say a little bit, of people meeting kinky people online, getting really hot and heavy and talking about it, and then that person ghosting you, like so disappearing or no longer engaging in the conversation long term, or maybe they show up months later, but it's only again when they're super horny and really wanting to talk about kink shit. So what the fuck is up with that? And if this is happening to you and you're being frustrated by this cycle, what you can do about it. So first, let's talk about extremes. And I'm not being critical of people who are in like more extreme, more intense kink relationships. I think for some people that is a perfect fit and makes a lot of sense. What I mean is extremes when someone is going from one end to the other, of like having a lot of intense scenes, really feeling a certain way about kink or doing some behaviors, and then totally swinging the opposite direction where you're avoiding kink, going super vanilla and stuff. Like that's what I mean by like these extremes. It's like this pendulum of going back and forth to like I'm into it when I'm really like feeling it and into it, and then I'm really not. And if you are getting ghosted by people online, you probably feel this a little bit, where you are meeting these people and having these online like relationships or conversations that seem really intense, and then there's probably not a whole lot of kink going on in your actual day-to-day if this is a cycle that you're noticing yourself in. But I also want to acknowledge that like if you are someone who is not then disappearing in these conversations online, the people that you're talking to might be feeling this in an even more intense, like more of a pendulum swing way. So they might be swinging back to like really have vanilla lives. Maybe they even have relationships or marriages or family or something where their life is really, really not built to accommodate kink. Or maybe they feel intense shame around it. Maybe they don't even have a family or kids, but they just can get really into it when they're really into it, but then, we'll swing back into feeling shame or disinterest in kink stuff altogether. And so the issue isn't that this happens, right? Like, what people are doing is their own business. But if you're listening to this episode because it's happening to you and you're frustrated because you want to be in these kinky relationships, and every time you get kind of close and find a lot of connection and commonality with a person and a lot of kink overlap, then they're disappearing. This is a negative experience for you, and that's why you're here. That is what we're here to chat about and talk through today. So that's a little bit about why this happens. And if you're scratching your head thinking, I don't think he could be married, well, think about it further. And maybe it's not a he. How much do you actually know about this person? You probably don't know a whole lot. You might not even know their last name or much about their identity. It could be that so the phenomenon with feeling shame around kink and sexuality is then, of course, the internet is a place where you get to be anonymous and hide parts of your identity that you couldn't do in the same way when you're meeting someone in real life. So it makes sense that people who feel this shame around their kink and avoidance, but still have desires to do it, would do that in these online spaces. Makes a lot of sense because it's, that's where you can hide a lot easier. Because, think about the fact that someone can even just like stop responding at some point and you might never hear from them again or know what's going on or even, know much about them to check in with them. I remember when this used to happen to me, and this was really early on in my kink journey, that I sometimes would worry like, oh my God, did something happen? Like, are they injured? Were they in a car accident or something? And you seriously sometimes don't even know enough to follow up on that and like check in on someone's well-being. So those are the types of situations I'm talking about. So it's a bit of a binge purge cycle. And last week we talked about kink events. So it's kind of a similar thing, kind of, where someone can swing from like one extreme of really experiencing it and talking about it with somebody and sharing it versus then like totally going and doing the opposite. And so, well, this does work for some people and is what keeps them interested in kink is being able to like have these periods of intensity and stuff. It's distressing whenever that isn't what you want. Like when what you want is to have a longer term relationship with somebody where you're experiencing kink within it, and not, having these lovely internet scenes and conversations and then someone totally disappears. Like that's when it's distressing, is when that isn't the thing that you want. So if this is happening to you, what can you actually do about it? The first is to acknowledge that this is, if you're attracting people who are in this binge purge cycle of like doing all the kink things and then not doing all the kink things, there's probably a bit of you in your life that you are doing the same as well in order to be able to attract it. It might be that you feel super pent up, like there's a lot of kink stuff you want to experience, so maybe you're a little bit more eager to hop into these online conversations with someone who's really ready to get into it with you too. So you got to figure that out. I'm not saying it's at the same intensity of like this other person disappearing. I'm not saying that you would disappear in somebody, but just if you're attracting this, look inward, look to yourself to like, where am I having this binge purge cycle as well, that this is like keeps coming up. Because once you figure that out, this is not going to happen to you in the same way. It's really not. So, and this might be a little frustrating to hear because you're thinking to yourself, but like I'm trying and I am like seeking out these online relationships, which is the thing I'm comfortable with right now. And I'm having these like super hot and heavy things and I'm talking about kink and I have done all this research. But the problem isn't that you're doing that. The negative cycle that's being repeated is that you're doing that, but then you're still kind of withdrawing in a certain way and feeling some sort of shame around it, where you are doing it in these online hiding places. Like there's some sort of shame going on there. So one of the biggest ways to start like flipping the script is to start making kink a part of your like more daily normal life. So it's not going to be so that you're not going to be as likely to be in this binge purge thing where you're also like very quickly investing a lot of time and emotional energy and like excitement towards this person, and doing it in really like intense ways, like all-nighters where you're texting or just, really making a lot of connections really fast. That is also you being in a binge purge cycle. So how can you make this more a part of your everyday normal life is the thing that needs to be figured out. So there are so many different ways you can do this. One of the bigger ways I'd encourage you to do if you're single is to start dating in real life places. Or when you are doing these online dating things, I find it's sometimes more helpful to go to places that aren't as kinky. And I know this sounds a little counterintuitive, but sometimes the kinky dating apps and stuff aren't really for kinky dating. You'll notice a lot of shame and anonymity and hiding there, where people are not sharing photos of themselves, and that's the same thing as what you're, it's the same thing. This might even be where this binge purge cycle is happening for you. So it might be helpful for you to instead look at dating apps that are more centered towards dating and relationships, where it's not going to have the same super kink right away intensity. So you can still find kinky people on vanilla dating apps. That's how I found my partner, actually. He was also vanilla at first. we turned him around. But it's totally like possible to find people in vanilla spaces. But the benefit of doing that in a dating setting is that you are finding people that are more likely to switch over to in person right away and have more of that longer term connection that you're wanting, rather than just like these hookups or quick things that then disappear and are distressing for you. So that is a way to do it, is just like switch up the places that you are looking online and really make it a priority to like turn those conversations around quickly, like get it to the in-person quickly. So I don't like, one of my boundaries when I was dating is I didn't like to send more than a certain number of texts back and forth before we met up. I wanted to like get a date on the books and then just meet there and start the conversation that way, rather than, investing all this time and energy into this online conversation first. So that might be a way you do it, where you set a number of like, okay, I'm willing to text up until this point, but then we've just got to meet, and that's just how it's got to be, because that's what I'm looking for. And then the other thing you can start doing is going into IRL spaces too. So like kink events, or just being openly kinky as well. Like, oh my God, this is one of my favorite little kink hacks. I'll share an episode where I share like a lot more tricks to this. But like I started wearing some like kind of subtly kinky merch outside, and it was so fun how many people started who do approach me whenever I wear these kinky things. Let me write that down. Let's put this note in. Kinky. But it's so fun because then, people are kind of doing the work of approaching you because you kind of outed yourself a little bit about this is what's going on. And there are ways to do it that are subtle, where you're not going to be like ringing alarm bells of people who are not kinky or don't have the awareness of this. So I'll link that episode so you can like see the full, more insight into that. But that's kind of the phenomena. And really the big switch is like meeting people in real life, like real people, and like talking and having in-person relationships rather than just online stuff. And again, like pacing it a little bit and keeping being aware of your own binge purge cycle of like, okay, I know that I'm a little pent up right now, so I am like more likely to totally flood into this person. So I've got to set some boundaries around like what is going to be, good mutual both ways, because I know it's distressing for me whenever I pour everything in and then this person can disappear. And then this is more of an energetic thing, but one of the other pieces that you can start to do is to start acting as if you're already partnered in the way you want and getting scenes all the time. So how would you behave if you knew that no matter how this thing goes down with this cute person you found on this dating app or online, like you are still going to go home to a lovely scene at the end of the day? Like, how would things change for you? And start bringing that energy into your behaviors. And then of course, increasing the way that you're giving yourself kink as well, so that you're just not in the same feeling of pent up and purging if you're able to get yourself these kinky experiences outside of these weird online things. So kinky solo play is a really beautiful, amazing practice for that. And if you're not doing that a ton already, I would really recommend leaning into it, because that's how we learn sexuality. Like before we have sex with people, most of us are masturbating beforehand to learn what we like and what feels good, and experimenting solo. So if you're not doing that already, like this is absolutely the way to learn about your kink and yourself and what you like and stuff. But then there are other little things you can do, like there were periods of my kinky journey where I had playmates, like kinky playmates, who I knew I wasn't interested in a relationship with them, but they were able to scratch this kink itch, and that was communicated both ways, so it was mutual. But there are ways to do that so that you're not constantly feeling like you're pent up and just needing to, rush into this thing to get it at all. So those are some lovely shifts to think about if you're going through this type of cycle. My heart goes out to you, really. It really, really does. I know this is a shitty place. Make a plan for first do that reflecting of how am I noticing the binge purge cycle in myself? How can you start shifting some of those thoughts and feelings that you're having into ones that are more empowered and more stable and stuff? And then just pick one way that you're going to start evening it out a little bit and removing yourself from this binge purge cycle. I think a lot of times people go the opposite way with this, where they get so frustrated that these kinky, like super lusty things aren't working out long term, that they totally shut away from the kink community. But that really, that's what exacerbates the problem and makes it worse, is because then you're in this much further, binge state where you're feeling really pent up if you're turning away these parts of yourself, because if you have these desires, they're not just going to go away. And it's not like they should. It's not like they're bad or wrong. It's just that you're just figuring out how to make it a part of your daily life, so it doesn't have to be this distressing thing. So yeah, my heart goes out to you. So sorry you're going through this. It doesn't have to last forever. You can just decide that you want to start shifting things, because whenever you start changing your behaviors and how you show up, just automatically, that's going to change how other people treat you. Duh, just like anything else in life. So I will see you next week. Yeah, I'll see you next week. I hope this was super helpful. Okay, we'll chat soon, bestie. Bye.
Thank you so much for joining me this episode. You can follow the podcast on the platform where you're listening to get updates with new episodes. You can follow me on social media at Kinky Bestie. I'm on Instagram. You can also check the show notes for any links or resources that I talked about in this episode, or just more ways to connect with me. And please share this with your kinky friends who could benefit from this type of content. There is also an option for each podcast episode to engage with Q&As or polls. So I'd love to hear from you and create future episodes around what you want to chime in with. So please check those out in the show notes too. And I look forward to hearing from you. Bye.